Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Accelerate Reporting Database Performance. We appreciate you joining us today. I'm Lori Blanford, and I'm the Marketing Manager here at Dun Solutions Group. And today's presenter will be Stuart Knapp. He's one of our Business Intelligence Managers based out of our Minneapolis office. I'm here in Chicago. All right, let's take a look at what we will be presenting today. I'm going to begin with a brief introduction to Dun Solutions Group, and then I'm going to pass the baton over to Stuart, and he's going to talk about the challenges that many companies have with reporting. He's going to talk about one of our customers who had significant reporting challenges and how those were met with the SAP Sybase IQ solution. He is going to give a demo of the solution and then give you some more information on the SAP Sybase IQ product. I don't anticipate that we're going to have a lot of time to answer questions at the end. However, we do welcome your questions, and should you have any during the presentation, please feel free to submit them in the questions box, which is on your GoToWebinar toolbar. Also, please let me know if there are any issues with the sound quality or with the video presentation through a question. That would be very helpful. I'd appreciate it. Okay then, to get started, Dun Solutions Group was founded over 24 years ago. We are a full-service IT technology, information technology consulting firm, or IT. We design, deliver, and develop a wide range of solutions using a variety of advanced technologies, and we deliver solutions worldwide. We're headquartered here in Chicago, and we have offices in Minneapolis, Raleigh, and Bangalore, India. Our offerings fall into three practice areas. The first is application development solutions, and we do things like custom apps, mobile app development, e-commerce, portals, and web design. Then business intelligence solution, and this includes end-to-end BI solutions, things like dashboards, reporting, analytics, mobility, and other advanced BI capabilities. And then we have package solutions, and these include specific software and services offerings for vertical markets or unique needs. In addition, we do offer training solutions that include classroom, on-site, custom, and virtual training. Our clients, many of which are listed here, are some of the biggest names in American business that feature many mid-market companies as well as a large number of government agencies and nonprofits. And you can see, as I mentioned, a few of those listed here. And to offer our clients the most advanced solutions possible, we maintain close partnerships with industry-leading technology companies, and those include Microsoft, IBM, and SAP. In fact, our partnership with SAP is one of our strongest and most important. We are a gold-level partner and have been a top-level partner for over 17 years now, and we utilize the full SAP Business Objects suite in our BI solutions. In addition, we offer comprehensive training at our authorized training centers in Raleigh, Minneapolis, and St. Louis, Missouri. Okay, Stuart, I hope you're ready. I'm about to turn it over to you. Let's see here. Over to Stuart in Minneapolis. Okay, Stuart, are you on the line?
Yep, I sure am. Well, welcome everybody, and first of all, I want to thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to attend this webinar. What we're going to start off with is, I'm just going to make sure I'm on the same page as she is. There we go. Is to talk about some challenges in reporting, and for those of you that are from the business side or from that side of the business, or from those that are on the more technical side, most organizations at some point in time as they progress, face some challenges in reporting. So what are some of the challenges that we attempt to address specifically in this webinar? Slow running reports, a need to consolidate from multiple systems, limited access due to size or performance issues, and what is very typical in some organizations, trying to run reports against a system of record or some kind of a transactional system. When we talk about slow reports, often some of the root causes are poor data source connectivity. With the advent of 64-bit and 32-bit operating systems, there are challenges these days, specifically with older technologies, with attempting to fit the round peg into the square hole, so that that legacy 32-bit application that may have been developed dozens of years ago, now there's challenges with using more state-of-the-art reporting tools against those data sources. Transactional sources typically are not very report-friendly. A typical system where information is entered, information is modified and changed on a transaction basis is often not designed on the back end to actually retrieve that data efficiently and be able to present informative results in a report without a lot of grinding through and strange relationships and tables, that sort of thing. Oftentimes when an attempt is made to report against those transactional systems, there can be impact to the transactional system itself, where, for instance, someone is attempting to enter information on a sales transaction or enter a purchase order, while someone at the same time is attempting to report on historical purchase orders, and there is often and then an impact in performance at that transactional system. And summarizing it, for the most part, most sources from a transactional just aren't intended for reporting. They weren't developed for that purpose. They weren't intended for that purpose, or if they were, it was for some sort of internal reporting process where there might be a menu option on the transactional system to see, well, let's see the orders for the previous day, that sort of thing, but often not something to show, for instance, a trend over month by month, over by year, that sort of thing. When we talk about consolidating, throughout the 80s and 90s, there was a huge amount of acquisition and mergers and that sort of thing, which meant companies often had multiple sources of similar information, or multiple sources even internally for different types of information, such as HR and payroll versus sales transactions versus inventory and warehouse management type systems. In addition to those sources that actually came from possibly a transactional computer-based system, there's also often user data, Excel spreadsheets that are maintained to build custom organizations of product lines, for instance, or custom organizations of how an individual might want to organize customers or geography, that sort of thing. And part of this legacy is often different business processes use different applications and methods. So an HR department may have a mix of a legacy transactional HR payroll system, maybe a third-party payroll system that delivers information to them in some kind of a spreadsheet or file, and at the same time maintain their own spreadsheets. And the final piece on needing to consolidate is differences in granularity. For instance, at a retail organization, they may well have granularity at the individual cash register receipt line item, but at the general ledger, it might simply be at the month by some consolidated sales or cost type level. So the granularity can be quite different. Limited access. So oftentimes these legacy systems and reporting tools, they're just inefficient or incapable of handling large data sets. That, for instance, oftentimes many of the legacy database applications that were more PC-based had file size limits of, maybe 1 or 2 gigabytes or even megabytes, to the point where the only way to report any kind of historical is to create copies of that data. And even if you did have a large enough data set that you could report against, the work was often pushed to the reporting system versus the database engine. So many of legacy reporting tools would bring all the data back into their internal memory and then present the specific rows and columns that were necessary on a report, but all of that work was actually happening within the reporting system's memory and not necessarily being pushed down as a SQL statement to a database. And a lot of this just resulted in reports timing out. and the frustration of how do I limit my results? How do I ask a simpler question, not the question that I need answered, but just a simpler question, so that I can at least get some results in a report, dump that data into Excel along with other information, and have to use some third-party tool to consolidate it. And then the whole idea that's out there today of analytics and dashboards and the need to, for instance, maybe display information mobile was just out of reach. The legacy systems just couldn't deliver information fast enough and in an aggregated enough manner to be able to then have it be consumed by something like a mobile device or a live, flash-based dashboard object, that sort of thing. So, we talked about a number of challenges, and the next thing I wanted to talk about was a specific case study that for a client that I was involved with over the last several months, and to talk about how some of these specific challenges really related to a real-world scenario. So just a little bit of background. Basically, the client was a local retail hardware chain with a dozen or so store locations plus a central warehouse. And their legacy system was actually just a PC-based system that lived on at each individual store as a standalone. And then on a nightly basis, there was an FTP process that sent each store's individual copy of their data to a central location and consolidated. And because of this, the whole idea of report development was simply arduous. That the legacy system was a point-of-sale retail system designed for cash register entry of transactions and was never designed for any kind of reporting. Most of the processes had to be manual to run these reports, refresh them, dump data to Excel, modify them, report then against the Excel, and then eventually distribute them manually via email once you saved the content, for instance, as a PDF, that sort of thing. And then because it was a legacy system, there were a number of data challenges. The legacy system had a 2 million row limit on its file size, and with a sales cash register transactions being their lowest level of granularity, that 2 million rows was very easily at a store level created within a year or two. And so trying to preserve history going back further than a couple of years wasn't possible. And the final challenge they had is they had no way of doing daily snapshots because they had no tools without having to go back to the vendor of the software to actually say, for instance, I want to know what my inventory is every day, and I want to keep that inventory in a file every day so I can see how my inventory changes over time, for instance. So a little bit more detail. So the legacy system was Microsoft Fox Pro, which basically is reaching end of life as an application, and there's no intention for it to ever be a 64-bit compatible application. And because of that, 64-bit connectivity to the data was impossible without purchasing some fairly expensive third-party tools. And because of some file limits, the historical data had to be purged to make room for new data every year. Because it was a transactional system, the data model for it was very complex and required in-depth knowledge from a report writer's standpoint to understand the join relationships between the tables, that sort of thing. And then even from a reporting standpoint, they used Crystal Reports, which is a great and robust tool. However, they had multiple versions of Crystal Reports, for instance, that going back as far as 10 years. So the ability to even transfer reports from one user to the next was a challenge. And like I said before, on the snapshots, they had no real ability to manage this data that was being created for them by the transactional system without involving the software vendor itself. So what do we do? So after a fairly extensive analysis and health check and understanding of their current business, we basically recommended that they go and implement the full business objects stack of tools, which included a web-based portal, report automation. We included an ETL, or an extract, transform, and load application. And initially, because of connectivity issues, we did what we call an E-little-tl, meaning we simply took all of their existing tables in their existing structure and migrated them into an ODS, or what we call an operational data store, target database, into a database application, which we're talking about today, which is Sybase IQ, which allowed their existing reports to actually just repoint to the same tables but in a new database and improve performance. We also, to follow some best practices in data marts and data warehousing, we did a more true ETL, which to this target into a conformed fact and dimensional model to add additional performance improvements. Once we had the data in a better target location, we created a user-friendly interface to be able to insulate these new users that we expected to begin adopting this technology from the complexity of table joins and understanding the back-end data model. As a result of that, we were able to offer enhanced data exploration capabilities. So we could expose now this information in a way that was never before available. And part of the tool set as a result of all of this was the ability to deploy the information in a mobile BI platform. From a tool standpoint, the key focus of the webinar today is SAP Sybase IQ, which we're going to talk about in more specifics. But in addition, the SAP Business Objects Edge 4.x SP5 platform, which is their kind of newest, best version that's out there right now, that's fully 64-bit compliant. We utilize SAP Business Objects Data Services 3.2, which sounds like a bit of a step backwards, but we had to do that in order to address the challenge with connecting to a 32-bit data source that had no intention of offering 64-bit connectivity. And so the 3.2 version was still a 32-bit application and played nicely with the 32-bit ODBCs that were offered for FoxPro. Then from the full ETL dimensional modeling standpoint, we were able to utilize Business Objects Data Services 4.1, which is their newest, greatest version, which is fully 64-bit compatible. So from a results standpoint, what did we get? Okay, we got real results real quick. It was a low-cost solution, and it's very manageable. So because it was all done with one stack of tools and fully integrated, that both the ETL and the platform and the database that ultimately was the target location all lived in the same world and spoke the same language. It was a very efficient method of rapid deployment. So you can see, for instance, we were live in 60 days, and that means the ability to basically ask questions of the data that never could have been asked before, as well as have reports that used to not necessarily run at all, now running 100 times plus faster than attempting to connect directly to Visual FoxPro. Overall report delivery effort was greatly reduced by using the BI portal, which offered automation and that sort of thing. We actually, the person who used to create these reports actually has been on vacation now for a week, but all of the reports she normally would have produced every morning now run automatically, and we made the joke that, oh, she's finally able to go on vacation now that we've automated this. So just a few sizing facts. Basically, we're up to right now a 5+ million row sales transaction fact table. And because of the ability to do these daily inventory snapshots, we're actually at roughly 8 million rows of inventory. So we're actually appending roughly a 500,000 rows every day currently. And one of the most exciting pieces actually was immediate adoption of the technology by senior management. Once we deployed the data exploration piece of the tool set, where we could give the senior management the ability to ask questions of their data without necessarily knowing how to write reports and not having to be so concerned about whether they're choosing the right tables and joining the right tables and that sort of thing. The actual president of the company now is actively involved with continuous improvement and that sort of thing to the end results. So next we're going to do a little bit of demonstration just to kind of show you what under the covers what Sybase IQ looks like and expose a little bit of the upstream tool set as well as far as how the tools within the business object suite talk to Sybase IQ and how that works. And then when we finish up, we'll go into more detail under the covers of the Sybase IQ architecture and that sort of thing. So just briefly, the first piece we're going to talk about is Sybase Central, which is their version of a management console. But just to give you a little bit of comparison, for instance, on Sybase IQ versus SQL Server, what we've attempted to do is take the same 1.2 million fact table with its relevant dimensions, and this original data set actually took up 300 megabytes of space on SQL Server, which I'll be realistic with you that in most database worlds that's actually a fairly small database, but from a demo standpoint we currently don't have databases sitting around that are much bigger than that. But that same database from a Sybase IQ standpoint, because of the way it's architected, actually only takes up 3.7 megabytes, or roughly 2% size, which is pretty exciting. So let's jump in to a little bit of demo here, just to kind of take a look at what the environment looks like. So basically, right now I'm actually on the server. This is the client tool that that could live on any client. I simply have it on the server and don't necessarily always try to load all these versions of tools on my local PC. But just to give you a little bit of architecture, that within Sybase they have what they call servers, and you think of them very similar to those that are familiar with the SAP Business Objects environment. They're basically virtual or server services that live on the machine and run and wait for commands to come to them to execute on the operating system. And each server can have one or more databases live within it. So for instance, you can see here I have this one server called Mega eFashion, and on it lives a database. There's another server that has actually 2 databases on it. From a best practice, they often recommend having it be a one-to-one, but it can be a one-to-many as shown here. There's also this term of a multiplex, which would be in the case of a highly shared environment where you have multiple physical server devices that can host the same database activity and share that share the resources across. We're not going to talk specifically about that, but within the presentation, and we will be emailing a PDF version of the presentation. Towards the end of that presentation, I've included a myriad of more technical slides that talk about the back-end architecture, especially for scalability and sizing and that sort of thing. So if we look at then within an individual database and the way that that's architected, those that are familiar with DBA functionality will recognize many of these same categories, things like indexes, things like login policies and users and groups and security. And it's there, having been involved with several different database applications, that functionality, fortunately, is very similar, and there isn't a lot of additional knowledge that needs to happen to be able to administer a Sybase IQ database versus a SQL Server, for instance, or an Oracle, that sort of thing. One of the terminologies that is used with Sybase is the concept of DB spaces. So DB spaces, for instance, are those places where the database itself resides, but really more the space that the database needs while it's running and working and thinking and doing effort. So for instance, and this is where oftentimes the DBA will administer and manage, in that, for instance, you can see here that, for instance, and I'm in the process of loading a larger database, so I had to add an additional space here. But instead of, for instance, having to increase the size of an individual file on an individual server, I can actually just have different files on different servers store the information that's necessary to run the database. So it allows true failover of multiple files across multiple servers, that sort of thing. So things like tables and joins and views, all of that is very similar to what you would expect, in any other kind of database application where you have your object types and names and primary keys and partitions and things like that. So that's the administration console side of the business of Sybase IQ. The next piece of it, and where the reporting piece starts getting enhanced, is and part of this is it may be a little bit different for those attendees that aren't specific to a business object suite, but I think oftentimes that's there's the relationship there, and much of this should be transferable to really any kind of whatever reporting tools you're currently using to report against your data. So this is what's called a data foundation in the business objects world, and you can see whether that the way that the tables are found and joined and that sort of thing is comparable to the way tables are found and joined and relationships are established in any kind of database. So that piece of it is, for the most part, transparent, that your business users or the users that are creating these database relationship models and that sort of thing for reporting will not, for the most part, see any change in the way that they do their work today versus against the current database versus a Sybase IQ. So then the final piece on that, and I'm hoping I haven't logged out, is once you do have that data foundation and you've created the reporting layer for the business to actually do reports against that data, for the most part they don't see anything different about building reports against that data than they saw before. It's still objects and dimensions, or if we were in something like Crystal Reports, for instance, it would be the same as, for instance, within that data foundation we showed earlier, where you would simply find the tables you need, create your joins, execute the queries, build your reports, that sort of thing. So for instance, and hopefully I didn't get timed out of here, so to do something simple like, yes, I did. I was concerned about that. Let me just log off and log back on real quick. Hoping to bypass all of this rigmarole. But one of the challenges in a web-based BI portal, which is a good thing oftentimes, is that users who are idle for too long get booted out and have to go back in. So that data foundation I built, which was the relationships between the tables, then was converted into a universe to allow a business unit user, for instance, to ask a query against the data. So for instance, by year, by store, sales revenue and gross margin percent as an example. So that's querying against a 1.2 million row table, and bringing the results back by year, back to 2000, year 2000. I didn't apply any filters and that sort of thing. But then one of the further tools, and this was back to the piece where the senior management at my client was involved, is the whole data exploration piece, which allows the user to, for instance, slice and dice and analyze their data. Those that aren't familiar with this tool, this is the Business Objects Explorer tool. So for instance, if I'm interested in 2011, and I want to see it by sales revenue, by category. So for instance, there's a number of occurrences in sales revenue. And this tool then gives people the ability to do interesting comparisons like this, for instance, that will demonstrate, for instance, quickly, for a non-technical user, oh well, I'm interested in T-shirts and I want to drill into that and see what that looks like. But I want to see it now by line, for instance. Or let's do something that do this. How about by color? So boom, there's indigo blue sort of thing. So it's a very interesting tool, and from a retail establishment standpoint, where they're evaluating product lines, evaluating vendors, evaluating inventory turns, that sort of thing.
Hey, Stuart, we had a question come up that I think you may be able to quickly answer.
Okay, sure.
When is the data aggregation taking place?
The data aggregation, and that's a good point, and let's look at that. I think I have that Webby report still open here. No, so let's data aggregation. Basically, that we're sending a SQL statement to the database with a sum and a group by, and so the aggregation is happening at the database level. And that's more in nature of the Business Objects Suite and not necessarily Sybase IQ. That Sybase IQ, like any other database, simply consumes SQL. And so the front-end tool, or the tool that writes that SQL for the end user, needs to be such that it will deliver efficient SQL. So there's a very strong relationship with the way that the database is structured from an indexing standpoint and that sort of thing, but also from how the tool that accesses that database writes SQL, or the person, if it's freehand SQL that's being written. So for instance, if I'm doing just year sales revenue, for instance, here's the SQL that's going to the database. Select from, where, and group by, and with a sum wrapped around it. So anybody on the SQL side or the DBA side is going to see that this is, that this is efficient SQL versus just doing a select year in sales and then having the reporting tool do the aggregation. And depending on the reporting tool of choice, that's oftentimes what the reporting tool will do, is that they will bring they'll bring all the results back into the reporting tool, and the reporting tool has to do the aggregation. Versus, in this case, when I run this, I'm only going to be getting whatever 8 or 10 years, however many I have in my data set. Only that many rows are going to be coming from the database. So for instance, you can see that if we, let's report here and bring in our define query summary here. In a better place, I can read it. So you can see I'm only bringing back 12 rows, and it basically took less than a second to run. Okay? So that really concludes the demo piece of it. So a little bit more on Sybase IQ. I can go back to, let me just make sure that, did that answer the question we had there, Lori?
I believe so.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So more on Sybase IQ. So that's all cool, but how does it do it, and how does it work under the covers? So just a little bit of a factoid. We obviously were looking at a fairly small data set, but Sybase IQ is actually in the Guinness Book of World Records, in that actually the stock exchange actually uses the stock market data is actually stored in Sybase IQ, and basically, it's 1 petabyte of input that only takes 250 terabytes, or I think, what is that, a 75% compression ratio of size. There are also basically bigger installations that Sybase can't talk about that are within the government, and they're loading roughly 3 to 5 terabytes a day of new data. So hopefully that's maybe how they found those folks in Boston. So once again, and then from leaders quadrant in data warehousing, Sybase IQ is in the leader quadrant for the 3rd straight year. Don't know what this is doing to me. Keep the current scheme. Okay. A little bit of background on Sybase. Sybase has been around for quite a while. SAP purchased them, I believe, in the last couple years. But they've been around since 1995. More installations, actually, than many of its competitors, or than any of its competitors, and actually they have more installations than all of their competitors combined from a columnar-based database tool. Basically, it's a standard relational database system developed in '93, SAP purchased in 2010. And it was specifically designed for data warehousing. If you look at the dates there, those are fairly comparable with when some of the large data warehouse efforts and books, came out, where the Kimballs of the world were professing data warehousing as a way to address the growing data needs of the industry. And it is a columnar architecture, which we're going to talk about in more detail. So the big difference is that, the data is stored vertically versus row-based. So each column is stored separately and then bitmapped. And this is kind of technical jargon, and I'm not going to get into specifics, and quite honestly, I'm not that familiar with the specifics. But we're including a lot of the technical information in the back of the webinar PowerPoint. It's optimized storage, so typically, for instance, there's 50 to 70% smaller than the raw data, and the database is smaller than the input data, even with all the indexes, including referential integrity indexes. So this is just kind of a brief example of what it would look like if you were to look under the covers of how that data is stored. From a speed standpoint, and I wish I had a large enough data set that I could demonstrate that that's one of the goals on my list, but it's professed that it's 100 to 1,000 times faster than a traditional transactional database technology. That the performance handles volumes of ad hoc queries in real time. So the idea of parallel processing in that multiple people can be asking very complex questions at the same time. It's highly parallel. One of the big benefits in many of the data warehouse projects I've been on with using typical relational databases are that even when you have a base fact table, that often to achieve performance benefits, that aggregated tables or pre-aggregations need to happen in order for performance goals to be met. OLAP capability, for instance, is included. Another big benefit, and one of the competitive advantages in that there are other column-based architectures out there, but in the case of Sybase IQ, it's not an appliance. It's not locked in any hardware vendor. I have it running perfectly well on a standard laptop, as well as just a fairly low-end server installation on a kind of a standard hardware. Less storage, compression of raw data, average 70%. So in the world of storage, especially where if you think about that same storage as also being communication across a LAN or WAN, that there's less information being transferred during both the load process as well as the retrieval process. And what does that really mean? So a column restore means less I/O, and less I/O means more data available for the CPUs on the server. And more data available for CPUs means more cores stay busy. And when more cores are busy, it means more and faster queries. So what's next? We'll like I said, there's a good deal of more information on the architecture of Sybase IQ, but really the bottom line is it's a columnar database. It's very efficient. It out of the box, it's self-indexing by the nature of the beast, that it's taking a row and turning it into multiple tables. It has to index in order for it to work. So what's next? A couple options are available to you. Done Solutions is available to come out and do an on-site proof of concept with Sybase IQ against your real data to show some side-by-side comparisons in performance. It's also possible, if you go out to Sybase.com, you can actually download an evaluation copy for 30 days. And so if you're hands-on and want to actually attempt to do it yourself, it's a fairly simple install, and you click the next buttons, and ultimately you have a Sybase installation with some demo data, as well as the ability to create your own, to load your own data, assuming you have some method of loading that data on your end. One of the other options we offer is performing an upgrade assessment for your BI platform in general. Whether or not it includes Sybase IQ, one of Done Solutions' key functions is to do what we call health assessments, or BI health checks, where we'll look at your existing BI implementation or lack thereof and come up with a score and a place in what's called the BI maturity curve, and help put together a game plan to move your organization along that BI maturity. We're available to help execute that upgrade plan, or whatever that whatever the effort is to move you along that BI maturity curve, as well as, you know, to help you understand about new features and what's available, not only in the Sybase IQ arena, but in the SAP Business Objects BI platform in general. With that, I think I'm going to hand it back over to Lori.
All right. Great job, Stuart. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Striking the right page.
All right. We did have one more question, although the answer is somewhat complex. So I just want to mention to the person that submitted that question, acknowledge it and say that we will follow up with you individually with an answer to that. Not something that we're going to address today on the call. All right. So everyone, should you be interested in more information about SAP Sybase IQ, or you, as Stuart mentioned, he extended the invitation to see your data working in the product, please do reach out. We are very happy to coordinate that for you. We will share a link to the recording of today's presentation as well as a PDF of the deck. And there are some pretty detailed slides around the SAP Sybase IQ product that we didn't review on the call, but we'll include in the deck just for your reference. So I just want to make you aware of those. And we do many webinars, many BI webinars. In fact, we have a very successful data warehouse series that we're in the midst of, and all those webinars are available on demand on our website, dunsolutions.com. So please feel free to visit there, and perhaps you'd be interested in some of the other presentations. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us today, and I will follow up probably early next week with a link to the recording as well as the presentation. Okay, take care everybody.